Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TF1 show. Sorry for a slight delay, but we got there in the end. Technology has just been, technology, I guess. Can't do much about it, but we're so happy to be live with you guys after the race recap. And I'm so excited to welcome Hannah from the Purple Sector as my partner in crime today with our little Italian Grand Prix race review. So maybe before we get into the details, Hannah, why don't you tell us a bit about the Purple Sector and what you do on there?
So the Purple Sector is run by myself and my friend Charlotte, and we basically cover a lot of different motorsports, mainly Formula One, Formula Two, Formula Three, and Formula E. We kind of do a mix of kind of serious content, but also sometimes having a bit of a laugh and a joke and talking about some of the more funny moments of the weekend. So we also have a blog, a Instagram, and a Twitter account. So go and just check us out on there and get involved.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely brilliant. So please go and give them a shout out and go have a look at their content. I'll also link all of their details in the description below, so you can go and check them out. All right, Hannah, let's talk about what turned out to be quite the race. Now, I'm going to be honest, right? So I was sort of very chilled this morning. I was thinking, I went to a really nice restaurant with my parents and my family. I was like, it's fine. I'll probably miss the beginning of the race, but I'm going to record it. So I will, switch off all of my notifications. I will mute the F1 content creator community group so that I don't see any spoilers. And it's fine. I'll just sit and relax and watch the race about half an hour after everybody else. And when I got home at about 5, which is already a bit later than what I anticipated, my power was off. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to have power for 2 hours to watch the race. And then I unfortunately saw the notification come through that Pierre Gasly won the race. And I was just like, what? And then I saw Sainz was second. And I was like, what? And I saw Stroll was third. And I was like, what? And I couldn't understand what could have happened. And I had no way of actually watching the race for like 2 hours after that. So I was just dying inside trying to figure out what the hell happened, because like, who would have predicted that result?
I don't think any of us could have predicted it. I laughed because I cover Formula 2 for Inside F2 and they'd had quite a dicey race, same with Formula 3. And my mum goes through before the race going, well, Monza's the Temple of Speed, so they'll probably give us a good race. Be a bit interesting. I was thinking, oh, possibly Verstappen will win or we'll get an unlikely candidate on the podium. I did not know what was going to happen in that race. Even towards the end of the race, I was sat there going, is Pierre going to win this? Like, is this really going to happen 12 years after Sebastian Vettel won for Toro Rosso? And this, I'd say races like this are the reason why I love Formula One so much because it's so
Yeah.
unpredictable. But I feel bad for you catching up later and just seeing the carnage unfold because
I
what
was so shocked, but like just the confluence of circumstances, like so many things happened that just crazy. Like you would have never been able to predict, the sequence of events. But it was amazing to watch. And I'll be honest, right? Let's maybe talk about the race winner and Pierre Gasly first. Initially, upon review of the race, so right, I went back and actually followed the race and I watched, big chunks of it on TV afterwards as well. And initially I was like, if I was Carlos Sainz, I'd be salty because, like, I think we do need to admit, right? Pierre, it's an amazing story. Really, really happy for him as a person. He's such a nice guy. Always, keeps his head up. He's worked so hard and has done so well this year. But what a well-timed pit stop there from AlphaTauri. Like, I have to say that couldn't have worked out better for them. And obviously then with the tires, I think he was running directly after, I can't remember now, just after the pit stop where it was running. But yeah, I mean, they spotted the opportunity and they took it. And I have to say he did so well to hold off Carlos at the end. But what could have been for Carlos Sainz?
Yeah, I agree. I think Pierre's kind of very much was lucky in the circumstances of having the virtual safety car and kind of coming in when he did. But I honestly thought Carlos was going to catch him. But for me, is I couldn't think of a person who deserved that victory more. For me,
Mm,
he's had an
100%.
incredibly rough time emotion with everything that went on with Antoine Hubert and then all the stuff with getting dropped from Red Bull and just seeing him go out there. And I think for me, it defined him at AlphaTauri. We've seen him kind of improve week on week, race on race, and then to come out like this and show the level of racecraft he did. The fact that he held Carlos Sainz off under pressure, because to be honest, if I was under that kind of pressure, I'd have probably gone out the Ascari corner. I'd have somehow messed up. But for him to be able to keep Carlos behind, but also manage it with the sense of when a lot of them kind of jumped in for the pit stops and things like that, he could have quite easily slipped back when the restart happened. Getting off the line when he did, I just think, to me, this is best race.
He did everything right. Everything that he could have done, he did, I think. Like, he didn't leave any stone unturned. And I guess, what do you think this race win does for him? Like, let's say as he's standing in, so let's say, the general driver market.
I would say this bumps him up massively. To be honest, I thought he'd be a pretty strong candidate in the driver market going forward from his previous results if I was the likes of Renault. To be honest, I know they've got Ocon at the moment and they've got Alonso coming in, but I'd have been looking like for next year, for example, or for 2022, I'd have been thinking French driver, incredibly talented. To me, to be honest, shows more promise than Ocon does. I'd get him in there because the likelihood is AlphaTauri eventually are going to have to drop him for a Red Bull Junior. I don't think he'll go back to Red Bull. They've been every week. There's a rumor that they're going to drop Alex Albon. I don't think Red Bull's ego could take it, to be honest. Having to admit that they couldn't do it, but also at the moment I think they saw dropping Pierre and bringing someone in mid-season actually probably does more harm to the team, let's say, than not just to the driver. But if I was for them big name teams, I'd have been thinking, get him signed, because to be honest, he is an incredibly talented driver. I remember back in 2016, I went to the British Grand Prix and watched him in GP2. And I knew from that moment, I was like, that man is destined for greatness in Formula One, because he was just so incredibly mature in his driving. And for me, he should be in a better team than he is. But to see him do well in the AlphaTauri was just heartwarming.
Yeah, it was such a lovely moment on the podium as well with him, at the end. It was just such I felt it was such a textbook sort of story, and just sort of such a conclusion to this narrative that he's been on with, Red Bull, and then getting dropped, and then, getting the second place in Brazil, and then also now getting the race victory with AlphaTauri in Italy with an Italian team on a day that Red Bull struggled so much. We can talk about that just now, but yeah, what an incredible day for Pierre. And I really do hope that this opens some doors for him. I agree. I think he can, he needs to find his feet at a team that values him, and that actually, I don't think the environment at Red Bull is the environment that Pierre needs. I think we've now seen so much evidence of that, really. So I really do agree with you, Hannah. I think Renault is a prime spot for him. And even, I think, Racing Point. If we can, cards would have to fall in a specific way, but I think that could be an interesting matchup with Pierre Gasly and Aston Martin. But let's quickly talk about his teammate. Not maybe as much to say, unfortunately, for Daniel Kvyat. I think he'd probably be upset, because I think he was running ahead of Pierre at the time that Pierre went for his pit stop at just during the safety car period. And obviously the race didn't pan out for him like it did for Pierre. But to be honest, another anonymous performance really from Daniel, from Kvyat. Not really much to write home about.
Yes, I'd say definitely an anonymous kind of performance is, for me, this season has been a tale of two AlphaTauris. You've had Pierre making headlines, doing amazing things at that car, and Daniel Kvyat, to be honest, is there as a placeholder. I don't think he's a bad driver by any stretch of the imagination. However, he was put in that AlphaTauri because Alex Albon got promoted to Red Bull because Daniel went to Renault. And that kind of dominoes fell in his favour, but I do not see him staying in that seat longer than the end of the season. Because to be honest, it's just been below average performances for me. Is on a day that saw Pierre take the win, dominate, and do so well, is eventually Daniel's just been flying under the radar, and he's not done anything to me spectacular that justifies his appearance on the grid compared to a lot of the juniors in Formula 2.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, I guess, because I don't think he did badly today. I think he was decently, it was fine. And, if AlphaTauri decided to put him first, he could have been the one celebrating a race victory. But I do agree with you that, yes, I don't even think if it had to happen to Daniel Kvyat today, it doesn't take away the rest of the season. Like, the rest of the season hasn't been that brilliant from him. And he's definitely, I think, the second best driver at AlphaTauri at the moment. And as you said, they're going to promote their juniors very much, anytime soon. I think if Tsunoda gets the super license points at the end of the year, I think we're going to see him in Kvyat's place. Okay. But alrighty, let's talk about maybe the one that got away for Mercedes. Firstly, I guess we can just say that the engine ban, or what do you call it, the party mode ban, that spectacularly blew up in everybody's faces, I think.
Yeah, to me that massively backfired on Red Bull, because if you look at the qualifying performances, Mercedes was still that far ahead. Is all it seems to have done is lessen kind of Red Bull and Honda's comparison between them and the rest of the midfield teams. And I full on feel that Christian Horner and Helmut Marko are probably shooting themselves in the foot in the Red Bull garage at the moment, because that has, I think it was Helmut Marko was saying about after Max's race, that's his championship gone. I would say Max's championship was
gone a long time ago, to be honest.
Yeah. But that Mercedes car just is so dominant. Like, look at Hamilton's race. He was that far back and managed to get in the points and breeze past everyone. He is just an unstoppable force this season.
Yeah, Hamilton, not that much to say, really. Obviously, great pole position. He's just looked so strong in qualifying this year, I have to say. I thought Bottas might beat him this weekend. Bottas looked quite strong, but Hamilton just put the lap together when he had to. Pole position for Hamilton. In the race, Hamilton was dominant, driving really, really well. I don't know if you want to say anything specific about the penalty, because the penalty is the penalty, right? Like, yes, they messed up to let him pit when the pit lane was technically closed. He got the stop-go penalty, and that dropped him to the end of the field. I guess that's just one of those things. I don't know if you had any specific thoughts on whether the penalty was a bit harsh or not.
I just don't think the penalty was harsh. I think it was very much justified in the circumstances of, if you look on the replays, you can see multiple red lights that they passed to say the pit entry is closed. Also, the fact that Mercedes weren't immediately on the radio. If Hamilton had gone to go to the pit entry, had got right by it and just before the wall, and they'd said pit entry's closed, and he had swerved back on, then I'd have said, as much wasn't ideal, he was far enough away from people. Yeah. It's justified. However, there were multiple lights. They are known. This isn't Lewis Hamilton's first rodeo. He's probably had similar instances happen across the seasons. He knows where to look for the lights. He should know. Mercedes should have warned him, quite frankly. But also, is a lot of people are saying, oh, well, they shouldn't have brought out the safety car. They shouldn't have done this and that because of where the Haas car was. But if you look actually where the Haas car was placed, it wasn't as if they could just push them back behind the bollard, because that's where the marshals were based. It wasn't even a proper exit. And I just think is what would have happened if Hamilton was going full pelt to go towards that pit entry, and God forbid something had happened and those marshals were on the side of the track.
No, I agree 100%. I think it's one of those things. He took the penalty. I think Hamilton was very sort of, accepting of it. He wasn't kicking up a big fuss eventually about it. Like, obviously asked, I think he went to the stewards, right?
Yeah.
And asked about it. But I think when they explained their position, he was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then, got down to business. His overtaking was quite nice to see. I really did enjoy him storming through the field, making passes left, right, and center, showing us a bit, showing us why they pay him the big bucks, and we'll get to his teammate just now. But I mean, to go from what was he was about 25 seconds behind the last runner, and to finish P7, pretty impressive, I think, despite everything that happened.
Yeah, I think even though the Mercedes car is obviously naturally very dominant, if you look at where Bottas finished in the same car, Bottas was in complete. Hamilton was in the Premier League, and Bottas was in the conference for the British football reference there. However, Hamilton was very much showing why, for me, he is one of the greatest of all time, even though I'm a massive Michael Schumacher fan, so it kind of hurts to say this, but Lewis Hamilton to me is such a well and multiverse driver. Is a lot of drivers quite easily could have gone, oh, screw this, I'm sacking it in. I'll just drive till the
Yeah.
end and I'm not really going to bother. But Hamilton put his foot down, took those dicey overtakes, even with drivers that, because they were fighting him for position, none of them gave him an easy route on the way through. So I've got to give hats off to Hamilton there, because that was a stellar drive and does show his quality.
Agreed. And let's talk about quality, and let's talk about his teammates. Now, Valtteri Bottas. Let me just get myself in the right, physical and mental state to discuss Valtteri Bottas's performance during this race. Because in qualifying, okay, he was close, but he would have expected to get pole position. If he wants to win a world championship, he needs to grab those poles, and he hasn't been. Hasn't been getting those poles this year. That aside, now let's walk through Valtteri Bottas's race. So start, disaster start for Bottas. Got overtaken by Carlos before the first chicane. Got mugged by Norris at the second chicane. Ran wide at the Lesmos. Got overtaken by Perez. Got passed by Ricciardo as well, I think, on the run down to the Ascari chicane. So started P2, finished the lap P5, P6? Can't count. I think P6. And I mean, that in itself is just not acceptable. I'm sorry. With a car that fast to, you don't always get a great start. It happens. But to lose that much ground to, McLaren, Racing Points, Renault, I don't firstly think that's acceptable. That was my first initial thought. What did you think about the first lap, Hannah?
To me, it was just a disaster for Bottas. I think drivers have had bad starts of the season. It happens. I think if Bottas was able to, in the next couple of laps, dice his way through the field, get back to where he should have been, I'd have forgiven him for the first lap. Yeah. However, that first lap to me was indicative of a race that showed to me why, or to me, grasped why have Mercedes re-signed him for next season? Because for me, he is just so far behind Lewis Hamilton. And I know Lewis Hamilton is great. However, no driver should be that poor compared to their teammate.
Yeah, and what I don't understand is he's so sort of blasé about it at the moment. Like, I don't know if he has not, taking the pressure off himself or something, or I don't know if it's like a weird mental exercise he's trying. But he's just like, oh, well, I mean, we'll come back stronger next race. That's all that he keeps saying. I'm like, I'm waiting for you to come back stronger. You've been trying to come back stronger now for 3 years, and every time it's just been disappointing. How long was he stuck behind Lando Norris? It was like literally 80% of the race, I think.
Yeah.
Couldn't get past. And I'm sorry, right? Now, Norris is a very lovely driver. McLaren was fast this weekend, but Hamilton was pulling more than a second a lap over Sainz and Norris at the beginning of the race. So don't come and tell me that car doesn't have the speed, or at least the lap time offset to be able to pull an overtake. And yet it was just stuck. It was like a bit of a Gasly throwback to Red Bull last year. It was like Gasly at Red Bull. Do you remember like those races where Gasly would just get stuck behind like the Renaults and the McLarens, and we knew he had the faster car, but he couldn't pass? It was like this for Bottas. I'm just sitting there thinking, how can you, and your teammate gets a stop-go penalty, which is about 30 seconds during a safety car period. So basically he's 25 seconds behind the back of the grid. And he finishes, was it 8 seconds off? 8 seconds off Bottas at the end of the race.
Yeah. And also for me, Bottas on that first lap, when he sat there going, I've got a puncture, I've got this wrong, I've got that wrong.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, is your team have told you that the Delta's fine, just get on with the job and drive that car. Is Bottas, to me, was finding every excuse he could to justify why he was doing so badly. If he'd have come out of that race, and it's my one thing I will always vouch for with Lando Norris. Lando Norris came out this weekend and said he was disappointed that he didn't get a podium. However, he did really well, all things considered, but he's always looking for that thing to make himself better. Whereas Bottas seems to have resigned himself to being second in the championship. Oh, I'm trying to think, has he gone back to second now?
yeah, it got to second because of Max's retirement. Yeah,
Yeah. But I think if Max had finished the race, Max probably most likely may have finished ahead of him and he would still be third in the championship. And to me, it's just an abysmal performance for someone in a car so dominant.
exactly. And you'd think, right? This is that one or two. Hamilton usually has one or two races during the season where things just go wrong because that's just the law of probability. And this is similar to Germany last year. Remember when, Hamilton had all of his dramas and troubles and Bottas, he wasn't able to capitalize. And again, this year, Hamilton basically is in all, sorts of pain and trouble. This is the one opportunity that Valtteri has to make up the 50-point deficit to Hamilton in the championship?
Yeah.
And he gains 2 points. No, 1 point. How many points? Because Hamilton even got fastest lap, so he didn't even get, that big of a points difference. And I just don't think that's acceptable for somebody that keeps saying at the beginning of the year, "I want to win the world championship this year." I don't think that's acceptable.
To me, I says Cav from the past couple of races, Bottas 2-3 races in lost the championship for me, and now he's losing any justification he has for being in that Mercedes seat. Is, to be honest, I still think George Russell should have been promoted to it.
I think so too. I think given how strong the Mercedes car is, right?
Yeah.
I think this would have been the perfect opportunity to get their junior in because they do have a bit of a buffer to the, the cars behind them. Get George Russell up to speed, use that, the fact that they are so far ahead, and I guess avoid what happened to Red Bull with Gasly and Albon, where they need to sort of get to grips with running in the top team and having to deal with, a competitive situation and, having to have a difficult car as well. And I think if they took that shot with George, I think it could have probably paid off pretty nicely. And I think Bottas is really not doing himself any favors.
Yeah, and for me, Bottas isn't showing that he's the future of Mercedes. He's ultimately Lewis Hamilton. If he goes until he's 40, so Kimi has, is he about 5 years down the line? Hamilton eventually is going to leave. It's inevitable. It's the same way that happened with Schumacher at Ferrari. They need to get their junior in now. Bottas, to me,
agreed.
I kind of actually predicted the season that maybe someone like Renault would have taken him. But to be honest, the amount they're paying him, if he got dropped by Mercedes, I wouldn't sign him again on another team because there are just far more talented drivers that, to me, have a future in the sport.
And I'm going to give a shout out to Kira here. I see Kira is in the chat. Hello, Kira. She actually did a pretty interesting video where she was asking whether, Gasly could go to Mercedes. And I think he can. I think if the situation arises where, Lewis Hamilton decides to hang up his racing gloves at the end of next year, or maybe 1 or 2 years into the new regulations, get Pierre Gasly in that seat next to George Russell. Why not? That would be an interesting lineup.
Oh, that would be an interesting lineup, to be fair. And if he did really well, we could see Helmut Marko and Christian Horner just cry in the corner because of it.
It's their own stupidity. Ironically, I'm just thinking about this now, but the top 2 drivers during this race have both been Red Bull drivers that they've shafted.
Oh, God, yeah. I forgot about that. That is the
Carlos thing doing so well. They also was like, whatever, we have Max. We don't need Carlos. And now look.
Yeah.
Now look, Hannah. Let's maybe talk about Red Bull next. I think it's the perfect opportunity to talk about Red Bull.
Yeah.
Now, firstly, I guess as soon as Christian and Helmut, as soon as they're able to wipe the egg off their faces, they'll look at the result and be very worried. I'd be pretty concerned if I were them, because I think the engine change, or the engine regulation change, did not work out like they wanted. I think the Renault engined teams benefited more than the Honda power teams. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, for me, the kind of party mode ban, all it did was Mercedes stayed at the front. Red Bull very much, instead of being kind of the second team on the grid, the gap has closed backwards, where the midfield ones have come a lot closer to them. So the likes of, even if you look at like Williams and some of the other teams, like Racing Point, were a lot higher than I kind of thought they'd be. All they've done is it's massively backfired, shot themselves in the foot, and they've only got themselves to blame. And I think this weekend has exemplified my biggest issue with Red Bull. Is every time there's an issue at Red Bull, let's blame the drivers. They blame
the regulations.
Yeah.
Or there's always some sort of inequity between them and whoever else, whichever other party is there. And I agree with you 100%. I think they need to put up their hands, admit that they probably did not that great of a job with their car, because apparently it's incredibly difficult to drive, which is really, really hindering Alex Albon in competing for, I guess, as far up the grid as he should be competing. I think the engine is not as good as they keep dubbing it up. They keep going on about how good the Honda engine is. Evidently, it's not as good as the Renault engine, which they let go very acrimoniously a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I think not a good weekend at all for Red Bull. Let's quickly touch on the drivers. Max obviously had a retirement, but he was sort of running in no man's land in 7th or 8th. I think he was running in 11th at some point. It was just not a great race for Max. Didn't really make any progress. Alex,
Oh.
I have to say, now look, I will admit, I'll put up my hand and say that I very much am an Alex Albon fan. I like him. I think he's a nice guy. I think there's a very fast race driver in there. Deep in there, there's a very fast race driver that just needs a bit of nurturing and a bit of, just a bit of tender love and care for Alex Albon, the fast race driver, to come out. But when I was watching the telemetry before my power went back on, so I was literally following the live timing app on the F1 website. And I was seeing Alex Albon behind George Russell in the Williams. And lap after lap, he's not overtaking. And I was sitting there going no, but this can't be this bad. It can't be this bad. And I think it wasn't this bad, but let me first maybe give you the opportunity to give your thoughts.
To me, it's just been a weekend to forget for Red Bull. Is Max Verstappen massively underwhelmed me during the race? I thought he would do better in qualifying. I don't know what it was about the track, because even the power mode, to me, that kind of deficit shouldn't kind of justify how poorly I thought it did. Is this race is not the Max Verstappen that I've come to expect. I've come to expect him to give his all in every race, and it just seemed like he kind of sucked it in, to be honest, and kind of was running in no man's land. And Alex Albon, to me, is the personification of Red Bull being the poison chalice. He is.
Good.
If you look at the history of Red Bull, they shafted Mark Webber for Sebastian Vettel, they shafted Daniel Ricciardo for Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly got booted out, Alex Albon is struggling. Red Bull have a major kind of environmental issue. Is their team is quite a toxic atmosphere. If you look at how Pierre thrives in the AlphaTauri, you look at the stress Alex Albon's under. They always
I have to say, after every interview, sorry I cut in there, but after every race, the post-race interview, you just look at Alex and you go that guy looks like he's on the verge of a breakdown.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's just under so much pressure. But anyway, I interrupted. Continue.
Right there, if you look at, I was gonna say, if you look at kind of Albon's attitude these days, is Red Bull just seem to demoralize and break their drivers down. They expect so much so quickly. If you look at Gasly, he didn't even get a full season in Red Bull before they dropped him. Very much is Max Verstappen came in, despite not winning the European Formula 3 title, I like to add, is he came into F1, was seen as the golden child, the new age of Formula 1, because he was one of the youngest drivers they'd had, well, the youngest driver they'd had up until that point, and then he's kind of gone on, and even sometimes he's had brilliant performances, but it's taken God knows how many seasons for him to craft into an actual racer, is not to let his temper get the better of him, to develop that racecraft, to understand that sometimes waiting the long game is the better strategy. And ever since then, they've not let any of their drivers have that same treatment. Max Verstappen is their golden child, and ultimately, it's going to ruin Red Bull because they're never going to find a driver that can take Max's psychological position within the team away from him. But ultimately, I would say Christian Horner needs to take a long, hard look at himself and his position in Formula One, because I would argue, is it possibly time for Red Bull to change their team principle and to try and change the atmosphere there?
No, I agree. I think they need to change something, right? And except Alex Albon, they shouldn't change Alex Albon. And I don't know, Hannah, if you saw in the chat, but there was apparently some rumors that Pierre might replace Albon at Mugello. Now, I'll give my thoughts first, and then I'll give you the opportunity to give yours as well. But that would, to me, be incredibly counterproductive, I think. I don't think anybody wins in that scenario because, okay, you demote Alex. Alex is back at AlphaTauri. Now, halfway through the season, he needs to embed himself in a new team, figure things out in a new team. Pierre's back in the Red Bull. So there are two things that could potentially happen, right? Either he does well, which is possible, right? He could do well. Unlikely, I would imagine, though, because he's also now going to have to get on top of a brand new car, brand new team. He's never driven that Red Bull before. It's not like he's going to have testing or anything to help him out. And now he has to, all of a sudden be on Max's pace again because for some reason that's the expectation. Alternatively, it could go as badly as it did last year. And now what? What do you do then? Do you switch them out again? Or are you now stuck with Pierre for the rest of the season and hope? So I don't understand if Red Bull, as Helmut Marko said, if Red Bull isn't really going to go for the championship this year, why don't they then give Alex Albon the freedom and the space to figure himself out and to figure the car out? And I've been saying this so much on this podcast, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record. But if they don't have anything to lose in keeping Alex Albon there, why don't they just do it? It's not like they're going to lose second in the Constructors' Championship. They're not going to win the Constructors' Championship. We know that.
To me,
I don't know what you think.
For me, logically, it would make most sense to keep Alex Albon there. Is, like you said, they've got nothing to lose. In very much, I think if Pierre got promoted, it would both harm Red Bull in the sense of the team mechanisms gone to work in a certain way. They've now got to get him readjusted to the car. It would also, to be honest, probably do more harm for Pierre. And he's spent this season redeeming his reputation, and then to go in the Red Bull. And to be honest, Pierre probably wouldn't perform well in the Red Bull. Nothing against Pierre, because that car is very much tailored to Max Verstappen's driving style. Although, to be honest, this season they've both Alex Albon and Max Verstappen have criticised the Red Bull for being kind of difficult to handle. To be honest, I just think if I was Red Bull, they're probably going to have to write off this season. Is aim for second, keep going as they are kind of for now, try to work on the car, keep Albon in, and look towards the regulation changes, because I think 2020 and one will be a write-off for them as well.
Agreed. I think they need to play the long game, as you said. They need to take a step back and think, okay, we now have a year and a half, effectively, to get our house in order so that when 2022 comes around, we are ready to go. And I think part of getting their house in order is getting their driver lineup ready and comfortable so that they can compete on, I guess, equal footing. sort out their car because there are some fundamental design issues there. And I guess they can really focus on the 2022 regs now and make sure that it's a corker when it does come out, that car. As you said, sort out the toxic atmosphere in the team. Because I'm sorry, the things that Helmut Marko was saying on this, he says ridiculous things most of the time. But this weekend, the things he was going on about, I was just thinking, did you read the one where he said, no, Lewis Hamilton phoned him repeatedly last year and told him point blank that he needs to put Alex Albon in the car? Why? Why would Lewis Hamilton do that? That makes no sense. Firstly, why would Lewis Hamilton phone Helmut Marko and be like, you know what, Helmut? I, as Lewis Hamilton, have critically analyzed the Red Bull Racing driver situation, and I've come to the conclusion, after much deliberation and thought, that Alex Albon is the right person for your team. Like, why? Where can you imagine any scenario where that would ever happen? And yet Helmut Marko told us this weekend that is exactly what happened.
To me, Helmut Marko's on another planet. Lewis Hamilton has far better things to do this time. But I also think, say with the Pierre Gasly situation, apparently he said in one of the interviews that his AlphaTauri needs a leader. And I'm thinking, yeah, it does. And Pierre is a good leader. But you are using that excuse to not have your entire car swap situation smack you in the face.
Exactly. And he's too proud, right? He's never going to go, like when people were saying, no, but why did they promote Alex over Kvyat? He's never going to put Kvyat back in that Red Bull seat because he has already unilaterally decided that Kvyat is not good enough for that seat. And if he had to put him back, he would essentially be admitting that he was wrong. And Helmut Marko will not admit that he is wrong.
Agreed. Red Bull, to be honest, I think that's going to be the story of the season. Is that, to me, going to be one of my biggest disappointments.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think we can move on to some of the next teams, but maybe as a parting thought, I was deep down quite smug or satisfied with how it worked out for them this race weekend because they have such big mouths, both Horner and Marko. And I find it sort of vindicating when they just get shut up every now and again. And, they must just go do their talking on the track, to be honest, and stop talking all of this nonsense outside, to the press. But anyways, let's talk about our little midfield teams. Let's talk about McLaren and Renault first. Now, McLaren, what a weekend for them. I mean, I think they were on merit. I think you said they were probably the second fastest team this weekend. Just crazy to think.
To me, McLaren have actually been probably one of my biggest surprises all season. Is we thought they started the Renault engine. I thought, they'll do quite well, but I wasn't expecting anything major. And suddenly they're becoming some of the biggest players this season. If you look at Lando, he's fourth in the championship or fifth. I can't remember now, but Lando.
I haven't checked, but he's up there.
Yeah, he is up there. And I think if McLaren keep having very strong runs, if Red Bull have more weekends like this one, McLaren, I think, will end up being the highest midfield team, but they could even pick Red Bull depending on how it goes. But
I think Verstappen's lead is big enough that they're not going to put Red Bull, but I think they can build a big gap on the other teams. Ferrari scored 0 points this weekend, and McLaren got a second and a fourth, and Renault got a sixth and an eighth. So, those two teams are sitting pretty. I think we can talk about Renault just now. I just want to give a shout out to Carlos Sainz and it's been well documented on this podcast, Hannah. I don't know if you know, but I rate Carlos Sainz as a driver, very highly. I think he's so steady and so good at what he does. He's not the most spectacular driver. He's not the guy that's, he's not like Max Verstappen that's there doing ridiculous things day in, day out. But he's just that really, really, really strong race driver that's getting the results. And I think to an extent, he very much deserved to win today as well, given how well he performed on, even running second behind Hamilton for such a big part of the race before, everything kicked off. And he got pretty close to Pierre as well, made some key overtakes when he had to get into that P2 position. He qualified incredibly well. I mean, his qualifying lap was super, super impressive too. So I'm probably going to say Carlos Sainz is my driver of the day. Might be controversial, but I think he was, like, to me, the star of the weekend. Just everything that he did was so well done.
I agree. I think this was probably Carlos Sainz's, I would say, dream weekend. I know he wishes for the win. However, I have a soft spot in my heart for Pierre. So I think Carlos, to me, is very much showing what he could be capable of in that Ferrari, if the Ferrari was actually any good. But he's very much, I kind of think this season is maybe him kind of redeeming his reputation a bit more. However, the fact that he has struggled against Lando this weekend as well, a few weekends where he's out-qualified Lando, he's outperformed Lando all weekend. Lando, very much that early couple of races, was on fire and everyone was talking about him, and Carlos kind of fell by the wayside. However, now it makes me more excited if the Ferrari ends up being competitive to see him up against Charles Leclerc, because I do not think he's going to be that number 2 driver who just sits back and goes, go ahead, Charles. I think he's going to be able to dig his heels in and fight it out at Ferrari.
No, I think Carlos is going to cause big trouble at Ferrari. I think it's going to be a very tight, difficult fight. I guess to see who comes out on top in that situation would be interesting. I think Ferrari would obviously stack the deck maybe in Charles's favor still, but I don't think Carlos is going to go down with the fight. I think it's going to make it as difficult as possible.
Definitely. And it'll be very exciting to see.
Cool. So let's quickly chat about Renault and Racing Point. We've been going on for quite a long time already. So let's sort of touch on key themes. Renault, I think maybe they expected more after Spa for, and Monza, low downforce track. Their engine looks pretty solid. They got 6th and 8th, decent run of points for them. I think maybe Daniel might be slightly disappointed given how well the McLarens did. But at the end of the day, not a bad outcome for them given the circumstances. Not really much more to say there. I guess the only interesting thing was, Hannah, I don't know if you heard Ocon's race radio after the Grand Prix finished. And he was like, guys, we basically wanted to say we missed some big opportunity. And Renault were not having it. Like, his race engineer was just like, no, don't speak.
To me, that always kind of reminded me of Ferrari when they were initially like, when anything goes wrong in previous years and they wouldn't speak to the media about it, it's very much that kind of, they don't want to damage their reputation. However, I understand Ocon's disappointment. However, to me, Ocon is one of my biggest disappointments this season. Is we were all touting him to get a Mercedes drive. We kind of thought, oh, he's going to be the next big thing. He's going to be the next Lewis Hamilton. Daniel's massively outperforming him. When Fernando Alonso gets in that Renault seat or Alpine seat, Ocon, I don't think will be able to keep up with him. And to be honest, I'd be worried that Ocon will get shafted after 2022 because he's just not being where he should be. Daniel's showing to me the incredible talent that we knew he had at Red Bull. And even though the Renault isn't the best car, they should have probably done better this weekend. I thought they were going to do better. But they were just thoroughly outpaced by the cars around them, especially the McLarens.
Yeah, so Ocon is a hard one for me because I actually like him. I used to rate him quite highly when he was at Racing Point alongside Perez. But I'll also be honest, I expected more. I thought he was going to be much more on Daniel's pace than what he has been. I think he still maybe has some time to find that pace. I hope he does. But every weekend, sort of, I'm hoping for him to have a bit of a breakout weekend. And it's just not happening. Like, there's times in the weekend where he's faster than Daniel. And then I'm like, okay, look, Ocon actually seems to be on the pace. But then almost without, exception, Daniel pulls a rabbit out of the hat during qualifying, and then he qualifies ahead of Ocon. So, no, I agree. I think Ocon, there's definitely room for improvement. Talking about room for improvement, let's talk about Racing Point quickly. Now, I guess, and I'll gloss over this, Stroll he was fortunate as well with the bit of a bizarre rule on, being able to change your tires during a red flag period and not, I guess, what I don't understand is why aren't they still compelled to at least make a pit stop? because there is that rule that you should at least make one pit stop during a race. So even though Stroll can put on new tires, why isn't he, compelled to at least still make another pit stop? Because I feel that's just fair. I don't understand that rule change.
I didn't understand it either. I think this year's highlighting for me the farce that is the rule book. If you look at a couple of races ago when the Hasses pitted from the radio messages in the formation lap, that got a penalty, whereas Stroll has basically managed to gain an advantage of roughly about, if it had been under a safety car, around 14 seconds. If it hadn't had a pit stop under safety car, it would have been 30. Stroll has basically managed to jump up the grid, not through his driving, but through taking advantage of a rule that probably most of us didn't even know about, I think, unless there is damage on that car that puts the driver at risk or the tyre's going to blow. They should be told you cannot make pit or make changes during a red flag. And
Agreed.
This is something they need to look at.
No, agreed. And I mean, then he messed it up on the restart. So, Ocon, Stroll, Lance, you got lucky. Take the podium. Good job. But just keep that in mind, Lance. Keep that in mind. That maybe you're a bit more circumspect the next time you do well in a race. Now let's quickly talk about the rear of the pack, Hannah. Now, which is basically our Ferrari boys, all of the Ferrari engine cars, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and Williams. Now, I actually don't have that much to say about Ferrari, surprisingly. Like, I usually have lots to say about them, but basically, their weekend was horrible. Their car is incredibly slow. Their car is impossible to drive. They scored 0 points during Monza, and they must be ashamed. That is basically all I want to say about Ferrari.
To me, I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet. Every weekend, I think, can Ferrari get any worse? And then they do. It's just the incidents in qualifying, to be honest, I think Ferrari probably thankful the Tifosi weren't there this weekend, because the reaction they would have got.
Imagine the scenes.
Yeah.
Imagine the scenes. No, I have to say, happy Charles is okay after quite a heavy crash. Like, when I didn't see the crash. I heard the crash when I was looking at the telemetry, but watched it back later, and it was a big hit. So really, really good to see Charles out of the car and running, like a gazelle into the pit buildings. Haas, Alfa Romeo, same old, really. Pretty slow, not really much to write home about. Kimi had glimpses of hope here and there. Giovinazzi had the same penalty as Hamilton, but all in all, a pretty bad weekend for them again.
Yeah, the Alfa Romeos to me have just fallen way off the pack. I think they were very lucky in the situation of Kimi being where he was on the restart. However, the one thing I will say about Kimi is you can tell the quality of the racer he is by when some of the drivers go for the dicey overtakes, they leave them just enough room. We saw it with him and Albon at Silverstone. We've seen it again this weekend. Is Kimi, although racing is only a hobby for him now, he is still, for me, an incredibly talented driver. But I do think this year is his final year.
Agreed, 100%. Then Magnussen had his incident. Grosjean was in at least, I don't know how many on-track incidents he was involved in. He had one with Albon, and he's just always in the thick of things, right? All Roman. So again, not a sterling weekend for them.
No, weekend to forget for Haas. I think the only kind of thing I can note of it is, due to Magnussen's incident, we had the exciting races.
Thank you, Kevin Magnussen. As I think Matt Gallagher pointed out, driver of the day should go to Kevin Magnussen because he's saved us. He saved us from the monotony of another Mercedes 1-2. So thank you for that, Kevin. A public service that you've performed right there. Then lastly, Williams. Again, a bit of a poor one. I think they knew this was going to be a struggle. They were on the struggle bus this year, and they were expecting to be, because their car is quite draggy. And obviously they took a bit of a hit with the Mercedes party mode being taken away during qualifying. So I guess, as expected, one small glimmer of hope for Nicholas Latifi. I think he performed quite well during the race, given the circumstances.
Yeah, I know it's like kind of at one point he was running around P11. I was like, is Latifi going to get points before George Russell does? I'd have felt bad.
It would have fit the narrative though, if you think about how George's sort of career has been going in F1 at the moment, right?
Yeah.
It's like Alex Albon on the podium. Just when you think the opportunity is presenting itself, then it gets taken away by some misfortune or some bad luck. So I feel that's going to be the same with George's points until he gets out of the Williams, where, you can have the most rubbish teammate and they're going to get points before him due to some sort of ridiculous chain of events.
I think, but hopefully it'll give Latifi a bit of kind of optimism and hope going forward that he can close the gap to George and close the gap to the rest of the pack. All I just want is Williams. I wanted Williams to get a point. That was kind of the one thing. But I think they made the best of what they could of the situation, but it was always going to be a struggle. But I think for them, it was just more of an emotional weekend for everything with Claire and Frank leaving Williams.
Yeah, a poignant weekend, definitely, I think, for Williams. Now, I guess let's move on, Hannah. We've reviewed all of the teams in great detail, excruciating detail. So all I'm saying is everybody in the chat there, and there are quite a few of them. It's been quite lively tonight. But I think they've gotten value for money tonight, Hannah. I don't know if you agree, because we have packed out, A+ levels of analysis, I think, on each of the teams. So for a bit of comic relief at the end of the podcast, let's talk about the TF1 awards and who we would nominate for the 3 prizes that we like to give out typically at the end of these race review episodes. And let's jump straight into the first one, which is the TF1 award and it's called the Pastor Maldonado Award for Most Dunderheaded Deed over the weekend. And usually, Hannah, you'll be surprised to hear, but Ferrari typically wins this award. But I think, for this weekend, which, it has been quite a unique weekend, but I think this weekend there are so many people that could potentially qualify for this award. So who do you think could we potentially nominate?
I was going to go with Ferrari, I think.
It's the obvious choice. I'm not going to lie. Right?
Name the award the Ferrari Farce Award, because that's just what the season's turned into.
All I'm saying is Ferrari with the Pastor Maldonado Award is like Meryl Streep with the Oscars. They're always in the running. They're always going to be nominated. I would like to nominate Red Bull, Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. I think the nonsense that they pulled with the lobbying, firstly for the ban of the partner modes, blew up in their face spectacularly. Them saying, this is actually my favorite Helmut Marko quote, where they said, Monza isn't a true reflection of the impact of, the removal of this qualifying mode. I'm like, you're kidding, right? If there is a track that is the perfect barometer for engine performance, it is Monza. And how can you, as Helmut Marko, say with a straight face to the press of the world that, you know what, I think Mugello is going to give a better sort of indication of the real impact of limiting engine performance during qualifying. So I was just like laughing out loud. What a clown. What a clown.
Agreed. I just think Monza is the temple of speed. It's the perfect opportunity to show how this would affect the cars. And he's just gone, because it has gone the way we planned, we'll just brush it under the carpet and we'll go on to next weekend.
No, it wasn't meant to help this weekend. And it's going to help us later on in the year. So no, Helmut Marko, you're a clown. Ferrari, you know who you are. Let's move on to the next award, which is the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award for Luckiest Driver. Who do you think?
Lance Stroll. I feel kind of bad because he is a talented driver. However, he was blessed by that rule that he could change the tyres in Park for May. If that rule hadn't been in place, if he had to have a pit stop, he would have fallen off the podium and Norris would have gotten it. So I think he's played the most blessed and played count his chickens, because it's been a very lucky podium. And although it doesn't take away from him, very much it was a lucky find in the rule book for them.
No, I agree 100%. I actually would have, maybe an hour ago, would have been controversial and said Pierre Gasly. I thought, because let me just maybe explain why I thought he was very lucky. So obviously I didn't watch the race. I was following, like literally looking at the live timing app. So I was just seeing sort of how the order changes and the sector times and so on. And I saw Gasly pits, right? And then like 30 seconds later, I saw Magnussen ground to a halt, and then the safety car came out. So I was like, what? Firstly, I thought, oh my gosh, poor Gasly. Again, 2 weeks in a row, Gasly got screwed by pitting just before, or by basically got screwed by the safety car. And then I didn't realize, obviously at that point, that they'd closed the pit lane. So nobody else was pitting. So I was like, what's going on? And then when I clicked what was happening, then I was like, oh my gosh, Pierre Gasly, well, like, what luck to be brought into the pits 30 seconds before this sort of game-changing event happened with Kevin Magnussen stopping, and then the safety car and closing the pit lane, and then all of a sudden he was running in P10 and now I was running straight at the front of the grid. That was sort of what I was thinking. And then when I watched it, after my power went on later on, then I watched the race. Then I was like, oh, actually, Kevin stopped before Gasly went to go pit. And that to me actually changed sort of what, my perception of the whole situation. Because I think, obviously any team, if something like that happens, they're going to be like, okay, there's probably going to be a safety car. And then he was just sort of in that window before they closed the pit lane. Yeah. And after the Kevin Magnussen incident, he was able to go in pit and come out. So yes, he was fortunate, but I think it was a really, really good job by AlphaTauri to use that opportunity. And then obviously such a great drive to keep Sainz at bay. So I agree with you, Hannah. Long story short, I agree that Lance Stroll should be the luckiest driver. I think he should win the luckiest driver award. And then let's do the last award quickly before we reach the 1 hour mark. The Nico Hulkenberg Podium Award for unluckiest driver. Hannah, who do you think?
Oh, this was a tough one to decide. Oh. I would say Lewis, because if he'd have not been caught out with the penalty, he'd have won. But I'm going to go Daniel Ricciardo, just because I think there were so many expectations. Everyone thought the Renaults were going to be better than they were, and they just weren't. We kind of thought, it's finally this will be the weekend. He'll get the podium. Cyril will get the tattoo. It'll all be done and dusted. However, their quest for a podium goes on to Mugello.
Yeah, I think Daniel's a good shot. I'd agree with that. I wanna sort of come full circle here and say Carlos. I think if the cards fell in a different way, he could have won today. And 100% agree with you, Hannah. Pierre deserved it 100%, but I think Carlos deserved it as well. And it worked out for Pierre today. Great that it worked out for him in the way that it did. But unlucky for Carlos, lucky for Pierre. Such is life. We move on.
Agreed. On to Mugello next weekend.
To Mugello, so another one next week. A new track, right? It's going to be interesting to see how the cars get on there. Whether we're going to see good racing, not sure. Having a look at the track, I think it's going to be interesting to see. But really, really exciting. Hannah, are there any things that you're going to be on the lookout for when we get to Mugello?
I think to me it'll be the Williams to see how they're getting on. Hopefully, because they'll have a new interim team principal to see how they get on. But also, is Pierre, see if he can take the momentum into Mugello and see if the AlphaTauris can push a bit further up the grid. Yeah,
100%. I think it's going to be super exciting to see. And I think that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of this episode, basically on top of the 1 hour mark. So it's been a marathon session. Thank you so much, Hannah, for taking the time and having the chats. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And you always have such good points and such great amounts of insight. And it's just so refreshing to have you on and to be able to chat to you today. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I was going to say, I've seen a lot of the comments coming through, and I know Lucy was requesting it. Also, by the way, I saw someone in the comments, I am Welsh, not Irish, but I have...
Of course you do. Oh, so, you're going to fall out, Hannah. Going to fall out. But anyways, yeah, everybody, please go check out Hannah's and Charlotte's channel, The Purple Sector. It's such a nice channel to have, and hopefully next time I'll be able to have both of you on the show. I think we'd most definitely arrange something like that. And then I guess to everybody that listens to my beautiful voice, thank you so much for tuning in again. It's been quite lively in the YouTube comments, I have to say. Thanks, guys, for that. It's been quite entertaining and a bit distracting. Like sometimes I'm sort of mid-sentence and then I look and I'm like, what is happening there in the corner? It's kicking off in the YouTube chat, but it's been super entertaining. Thank you so much, guys. If you enjoyed this race review, please leave a little comment. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button if you really enjoyed it. And we'll be back next week with another race review episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye.